Thank you.
What? No, it's my first. It's a premiere at the. At 12:45 in this room, and she will be on time, unlike me. Our Deputy Secretary General will be here, and she'll be accompanied by Ambassador Hector Gomez Hernandez, the permanent representative of Spain to the United Nations, and also by the Ambassador Chola Milambo, the permanent representative of Zambia to the United Nations, and they'll be here to preview for you the upcoming Financing for Development conference that is taking place, or that will be taking place in Sevilla, in Spain. Just starting off with, obviously, the latest developments in the Middle East. As you saw earlier today on social media, the Secretary General welcomed President Trump's announcement of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. The Secretary General urges the two countries to respect that ceasefire fully. The fighting must stop, he said, as the people of both Israel and Iran have already suffered too much. The Secretary General hopes that this ceasefire can be replicated in the other conflicts in the region. We also, yesterday afternoon, the Secretary General also expressed his deep alarm at the further escalation of the conflict in the Middle East in relation to the attack by Iran on the state of Qatar. In a tweet, he strongly condemned the attack on Qatar, a country that he said has been active for peace in the region and further afield. The Secretary General urges all member states to uphold their obligations under international law and the UN Charter. And speaking of the Charter, yesterday evening he delivered remarks at a ceremony that took place here to welcome home the original UN Charter 80 years after it was written. 80 years is the blink of an eye of history, he said, and yet until the United Nations, humanity never had a single place where every government and all peoples could unite to fix the world and build something better together. This morning, Hannah Tete, the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Libya and head of our political mission, briefed the Security Council via video conference. She said the UN mission in Libya has helped to support the preservation of the fragile truce that was reached on May 14th. It's also been able to develop mechanisms to facilitate a de-escalation of tensions in order to prevent further clashes and ensure the protection of civilians. She warned that there are reports of continued buildup in fears among many Libyans that armed clashes will resume. The UN mission urges all political parties and all security actors to refrain from provocative rhetoric and provocative actions that could only serve to deepen the lack of trust and undermine all de-escalation efforts made to sustain a fragile ceasefire. Ms. Tete also noted that the calls from many Libyans for the UN mission to act swiftly to facilitate a Libyan-led and Libyan-owned political process that could lead to credible elections and unified institutions. She said that UNSMIL will intensify its engagement in the coming weeks, building on the momentum generated by the Berlin meeting earlier this month. This afternoon, Rosemary DiCarlo, on a different topic, but in the Security Council at 3 p.m. this afternoon, Rosemary DiCarlo, our Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, will brief the Security Council on the Secretary General's report as required as requested by Resolution 2231. And as you know, that resolution refers to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, otherwise known as the JCPOA. Turning to the situation in Gaza, where amid ongoing hostilities, Palestinians continue to be killed and they continue to be injured. This includes reports of people coming under fire near non-UN militarized distribution sites or on routes designated by the Israeli authorities for the United Nations to collect trucks carrying aid. The mission that we told you about yesterday that attempted to Excess fuel stored in Rafah has been successfully accomplished. That fuel is being allocated to run critical services in the south, thereby buying us some more time. However, unless fuel is actually delivered inside Gaza, these lifelines were very quickly shut down. Fuel, to state the obvious, is essential to produce and to treat and to distribute water to more than 2 million people living inside Gaza. UNICEF warns that if the current more than 100-day blockade on fuel coming into Gaza does not end, children may begin to die of thirst. Israeli authorities must also allow the delivery of fuel in sufficient quantities into and throughout the Gaza Strip, including in the north. If our life-saving operations shut down, people will not be able to survive. Meanwhile, caregivers are warning that children are experiencing mounting psychological stress. This is driven by their deteriorating conditions, including a lack of food. Last week, in several displacement sites in Gaza, Deir el-Balah and Khan Yunis, we and our partners provide more than 1,000 children with sessions to help them manage their fears and other difficult emotions. Today, the World Health Organization is also sounding alarm over the mental health emergency in Gaza. Across the Strip, WHO has trained hundreds of frontline humanitarian workers in psychological first aid to support people and promote a sense of safety among the population. And today, the Israeli army issued yet another displacement order in 3 neighborhoods in Jabalia in the north. At least 30,000 people are assessed to be in those areas. Our humanitarian colleagues remind us that most of Gaza remains under some sort of displacement orders. With no shelter supplies allowed into Gaza and many of the existing shelters requiring urgent repair works, our partners in Khan Yunis are working creatively to recycle wooden pallets received as part of food shipments to rehabilitate and maintain temporary sites. Our humanitarian colleagues remind us that just like fuel, shelter materials have been banned for over 16 weeks now. This is at a time that hundreds of thousands of people have been newly displaced. Yesterday, we, along with our partners, attempted to coordinate 14 humanitarian movements. 6 of those were denied outright. These included the trucking of fuel, water, as well as the retrieval of bodies and broken trucks. And today in Lebanon, Major General Diodato Abbagnara of Italy officially assumed his position as commander of the UN peacekeeping forces in southern Lebanon, otherwise known as UNIFIL. Major Abbagnara previously served as UNIFIL Sector West commander. Most recently, he was the commander of the Military Technical Committee for Lebanon that coordinated multinational support to the Lebanese armed forces. We congratulate him on taking up his new position. As you know, he is taking over from Lieutenant General Haroldo Lazaro of Spain, who led the mission during some extremely challenging times, to say the least. As the new general takes up his position, as the general takes up his new position at the head of UNIFIL, the mission's efforts remain focused on containing the escalation in the south of Lebanon and creating conditions for durable political solution along the Blue Line. And I want to flag the ongoing tragedy in Ukraine, where humanitarian colleagues tell us that 27 civilians have been killed and more than 230 injured over the past 48 hours across Ukraine. That's what local authorities are telling us. Children were among the victims, with 1 child killed and 10 others injured. Attacks have intensified in the regions of Dnipro, of Sumy, and Odessa, while in Donetsk, Kherson, Kharkiv regions also reported multiple civilian casualties and damages to homes, to schools, hospitals, and other critical infrastructure. According to local authorities, earlier today, local time, the city center of Dnipro was hit by multiple missiles, with 1 strike close to UN premises in the city. The regional governor reported 29 schools and kindergartens have been damaged, along with 8 healthcare facilities. Yesterday, in the Odessa region, an attack on a school killed 3 staff members and injured others, including youths. According to the International Organization for Migration, in a report released for May, more than 21% of children ages 3 to 5 are not attending school or not attending preschool due to displacement proximity to front lines. In frontline regions, non-attendance reaches 37%. And from January to May of this year, humanitarian organizations provided education support to over 270,000 people across the country, while 25,000 children accessed digital and temporary learning spaces. Moving to the African continent and Sudan, where we are gravely alarmed by reports of a deadly attack on a hospital in West Kordofan state over the weekend. According to the World Health Organization, more than 40 civilians were killed in this attack on the Al-Mujlad hospital, including children and health workers, with dozens of people injured. WHO noted there was also extensive damage to that hospital. We've always condemned all attacks on healthcare facilities and personnel, particularly in conflict zones, where reaching the injured can be difficult, if not impossible. The parties must respect the specific protection afforded to healthcare personnel under international humanitarian law. The rules of war demand that the wounded and that the sick, as well as medical personnel in hospitals, be protected at all times. The attack on the hospital comes at a time when about 3/4 of health facilities in areas worst impacted by conflict, including in the Kordofan region, are barely operational or they're just closed. Meanwhile, health and humanitarian partners overstretched and underfunded as they try to stem the spread of disease, including measles and cholera. Though on cholera, we have some positive news to report despite all of these challenges. The number of new suspected cases has sharply declined in recent weeks. Between June 16th and the 22nd, 207 new suspected cases were reported, compared to more than 8,400 between May 19th and the 25th. That's what the Sudanese Ministry of Health is telling us. We and our partners are working on health and water, sanitation, and hygiene, continue to scale up the response against cholera. More than 3 million oral cholera vaccine doses have been delivered to Khartoum and North Kordofan, with vaccination campaigns already underway. Another 3 million doses are expected to arrive shortly. So far, partners have reached 2.3 million people through emergency water and sanitation activities, while hygiene promotion efforts have supported 1.3 million people. However, aid organizations are now facing a depletion of the pre-positioned supplies due to the early onset of the outbreak, which was driven by attacks on infrastructure, as well as disruption to power and water sources. OCHA stresses that flexible funding is urgently needed to sustain and scale up the response, especially with cholera cases feared to rise again from July to August onwards, with the rainy season returning and potential flooding taking place. In the nearby Democratic Republic of the Congo, our peacekeeping colleagues there are facilitating a 5-day dialogue which brings together the leaders of 6 armed groups, including the Codeco and the Zaire groups. The dialogue launched yesterday in Aru in the Ituri province, also included provincial authorities, community representatives, as well as officials of the Provincial Disarmament, Demobilization, Reintegration, Community Stabilization Program. Our colleagues say this is part of the government-led peace process and also aims to support the protection of civilians, helps to restore the state authority, and to help define disarmament and demobilization modalities. This week's dialogue also seeks to identify concrete steps to enable the return of displaced people and the resumption of socioeconomic activities. In addition to facilitating the discussions, the peacekeeping mission provided substantive logistical support. This is the second dialogue session in Aru. The first one was held in May and June 2 years ago and led to an active engagement by the participating groups. And in Chad, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that $8 million has been allocated from the OCHA Regional Pooled Fund to support humanitarian response in that country. $6 million will go towards assisting vulnerable host communities, Sudanese refugees, and Chadian returnees in the eastern part of Chad. The remaining $2 million will support more than 220,000 people displaced in Chad's western Lake province, where there are ongoing attacks by non-state armed groups, as well as secondary displacement of people who are just in search of alternative livelihoods given the inadequacy of humanitarian aid that is being delivered. The new funding, largely directed through national humanitarian partners, comes on the heels of $14.5 million distributed by the Central Emergency Fund earlier this year, primarily focusing on eastern Chad. As a reminder, since the conflict began in Sudan, Chad has received 860,000 Sudanese refugees and 274,000 Chadian returnees. More than 700,000 of all those people are children. Chadian authorities, in collaboration with humanitarian organizations, continue to provide life-saving assistance and protection to refugees both inside and outside camps, as well as to the returnees and host communities. Ongoing efforts include relocating refugees to safer areas, providing food assistance, vaccinating children, setting up child-friendly spaces, and delivering gender-based violence services. These operations are far from adequate. Funding shortfalls continue to hamper the response, leaving many refugees and vulnerable communities in precarious conditions. The looming flood season also threatens to make matters worse there. Despite the recent funding allocations, Chad's humanitarian response plan remains critically underfunded, like the vast, vast majority of all our humanitarian appeals. Only 11% of the $1.4 billion required has been received. Of this, $835 million is urgently needed to assist 2.8 million people facing the most acute needs across the country. Speaking of refugees, our friends at UNHCR today released a report estimating 2.5 million refugees worldwide will need to be resettled next year. The agency notes that while the figure remains high, annual resettlement needs have decreased for next year, down from 2.9 million in 2025, even as global numbers of refugees continue to grow. This is mainly due to the changed situation in Syria, which has allowed for voluntary returns. UNHCR says that for 2026, the largest refugee populations will need to be resettled are Afghans, followed by Syrians, South Sudanese, Sudanese, Rohingya, and Congolese. Last year, despite these challenges, more than 116,000 refugees were given the opportunity to find safety and rebuild their lives through UNHCR-assisted resettlement. Our colleagues at UNEP, UN Environment Program in Kenya, note that countries have agreed on an intergovernmental science policy panel on chemicals, on waste and pollution. The panel established in Punta del Este, Uruguay, on Friday is expected to conduct global assessment, identify knowledge gaps, and communicate complex science in policy-friendly formats, among other functions. UN Environment points out that this new panel completes a global scientific trifecta alongside the IPCC on climate change and the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem. Secretary General delivered a message to the Internet Governance Forum in Norway today, telling participants that digital risks accelerate, so must we. He said that means, among other things, bridging digital divide, expanding affordable, meaningful Internet access, closing the skills gap, countering online hate speech, promoting information integrity, tolerance and respect, addressing the concentration of digital power and decision-making in the hands of a few, and fostering greater diversity, transparency, and trust in digital spaces. He said, let us keep building a digital future that protects, empowers, and includes everyone everywhere. And today is the International Day of
Women Diplomats.
Exactly, Edie Lederer. It is the International Day of Women in Diplomacy. In a post to mark the day, our top female diplomat, and that would be Amina Mohammed, our Deputy Secretary General, said that today she celebrates the women shaping a fairer, more peaceful world at the table and beyond, and the Secretary General joins her in that. Edie.
Thank you very much, Steph. The Secretary General, in his statement that you read just now, referred to ceasefires and his hopes for ceasefires in other countries in the Mideast. I assume he was referring first and foremost to Gaza.
That would be a correct interpretation.
Today, 44 Palestinians were reportedly killed, at least, trying to get food, and the number of Palestinians killed rose to 56,000, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Does the Secretary General believe that it is time for some kind of a new global international initiative in light of the ceasefire between Israel and Iran to try and end the Gaza conflict?
Look, I think the tragic numbers that you refer to speak for themselves as to the horrors of what is going on in Gaza. People being killed just for trying to get food because of a militarized humanitarian distribution system that meets none of the prerequisites for a functioning, fair, independent, and impartial humanitarian system. Cannot forget also the hostages that remain held captive in Gaza. We have seen those member states involved in negotiations, notably Qatar, the U.S., and Egypt, being able to achieve and to get the parties to a ceasefire. It is high time that that leaders on both sides find the political courage to put a stop to this carnage. Deji.
We know there's a ceasefire deal. Obviously, Secretary General welcomed it. I'm just curious what is going to happen next. It seems today the Iranian president talking to Malaysian Prime Minister said Iran is ready to go back to negotiation table. How would this go with the JCPOA? And what is the vision for the Secretary General on this?
Look, I mean, first of all, Deji, I can't predict what will happen tomorrow, right? And I don't think anyone would be foolish enough to try to make a prediction. What we do want to see, as the Secretary General said, is a return to diplomacy to avoid, for both Iran and Israel, to avoid any sort of not only military action but rhetoric that could lead to a resumption of the fighting. We want to see the parties go back to the negotiating table. We want to see a return to the regime where the IAEA was engaged in a dialogue with Iran. As for the JCPOA, I mean, I think we all know the decisions taken by the United States long ago on the JCPOA. Secretary General continues to be mandated by the Security Council to report back. I think his report is pretty clear on that front, and I'll leave it at that.
I mean, if President Trump said that most of the nuclear facilities has been taken out completely, totally destroyed, would that be easier to have a deal now?
Look, I think we will let the IAEA speak as to the state of nuclear facilities in Iran. What we want to see is a diplomatic solution that ensures the exclusive peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program, as the Secretary General said in the report. Yep. Amélie, then Magdalena.
On a completely different topic, there are media reports that 5 European countries, Finland, the Baltic State, and Poland, are planning or have already submitted like a joint withdrawal of the treaty to ban anti-personnel mines. I was wondering if the UN received any kind of official notification from them.
You know, I think we did. Let me get back to you on that, because I think we did, but I don't want to speak out of turn, so I will send you something, an update. Yes, Magdalena. There you go.
Okay. Do we know if the IAEA workers are going to be able to go back to the sites in Iran anytime soon?
I think that's not a question I can answer from here. You should ask the IAEA. Yes, please. Go ahead, and then Alexei.
I wanted to ask a similar questions, but so it sounds like the IAEA inspectors still they have not gained access to the.
I really
site.
don't. I think the IAEA is the UN agency with the technical know-how, and they're directly engaged on these issues. I cannot speak for them on this.
Thanks so much, Steph. I have a really quick follow-up on the ceasefire deal between Israel and Iran. Has the U.S. mission to the United Nations formally notified the Secretary General about the ceasefire?
I'm not as a few hours ago, but I will double check.
Thank you.
Though we have been in touch. I mean, our colleagues have been in touch informally with the U.S. mission.
Before the ceasefire? Or
Sorry?
before the ceasefire or after?
No. I mean, last night and this morning. Yes, sir, and then Evelyn.
Dave Hamelberg, Fox News. What do you say to the critics who say that the conflict in Iran is really being resolved, through force and not the United Nations? I mean, and the announcement of the ceasefire, it seems like force was more of an inertia than the, especially since the pullout of the Americans in the JCPOA in 2018. I'm just wondering if you can sort of describe what the UN's feeling is with the actions of the last week versus the call to diplomacy.
Look, I think we're not living in a bubble, right? So we're well aware of what is going on in the world, what is well aware of going on in the region. The Secretary General, I think, had been very vocal from the beginning of calling for an end to this conflict, for a resumption to diplomacy, for a resumption of the dialogue between Iran and the IAEA to ensure the peaceful uses of Iran's nuclear energy. A ceasefire was obtained. We welcomed it very clearly. Each conflict in the world needs to be solved through diplomacy. Sometimes that diplomacy goes through the United Nations, sometimes it does not. The important thing for us is that a conflict ends. Okay, Evelyn, sorry, yep.
Sorry, I'm not even, okay, got it. Thank you, Stéphane. The U.S. Supreme Court has now allowed the Trump administration to deposit migrants anywhere in the world. The latest group, or 8 or 12 of them, have been sent to South Sudan. Is there any reaction to having...
Look, I mean, we spoke to our colleagues at UNHCR today, and we've been in touch with them and IOM. Look, they've taken note, we've all taken note of the decision of the Supreme Court. I think for us, what is clear is that any transfer of arrangements of people should ensure access to asylum, due process, and respect for the principles of non-refoulement, meaning that people in need of international protection must not be returned to a place where they face risk or harm. Whether they are migrants or refugees, people have rights and have a dignity that needs to be respected. Okay, any questions online? Okay. What? I can't hear. Yeah.